Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith. And today I am sharing the second part of my interview with William C. Davis, musician, conductor, and retired choral educator. In our last episode, we learned a little bit about Bill's background and how he worked with school administration to create incredible opportunities for his choral students. And one of those opportunities took his choir to the beaches of Normandy and created an opportunity for healing and for learning. And if you haven't listened to or watched that episode yet, I recommend that you do that right after you're done watching this one. In today's part 2, we're going to take a minute to talk about expectations and how to set them and how to get our students to reach them. We also learn to keep our lives in music making in perspective, and Bill gives his advice to new musicians, no matter where they are in their career and no matter where their career is taking them. And with that introduction, please enjoy my part 2 of my conversation with William C. Davis. That is so great. Now, so you had to prepare all these students and you had great feeder programs. What did you do as a teacher to get the best performance out of your students? Did you have any little tricks or any little things that you did?
I wouldn't call them tricks so much as there were things that I always made sure that I chose quality music to perform, and that didn't mean it had to be classical music, though a lot of it was. But it would be quality music, quality arrangements, and then we would perform it to the best of our ability. And I insisted on that, and no nonsense. We had fun in rehearsals, and we'd laugh at each other when they'd laugh at me because I'm not perfect, and every once in a while, I said, oh, gee. And that would always generate some comments. But to just really do things well, not mediocre. I had a saying, and I said, mediocrity does not belong in this room. It says, we don't do mediocre here. Mm-hmm. I said, and I hope you understand that.
Yeah. So you set those expectations for them.
And so the expectation, and I have to say they were pretty high, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. Because they rose to the occasion, and I had just wonderful kids, wonderful students. And we were able to do really remarkable things. I'd do a Mendelssohn piece in 8-part harmony, a cappella. We would do stuff with instruments, pieces. One of my favorite, I love musical theater. And one of several. It's hard for me to say a favorite because as soon as I say that, I can think of 3 other things over here that, yes, that's my favorite too. And then, so let's not do the favorite thing. But one thing I really had a wonderful time doing was some music from musical theater. And I have to say, fell in love with the musical Godspell. I hope you're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And saw it several times. Saw it twice in New York City and a couple times in other theaters. All done wonderfully well. And love the message and love the music. And there existed an arrangement of the music from Godspell, and I took it, and then I said, there's too much missing from this arrangement, and so I bought the full score, and took out the pieces that were missing, and wrote my own arrangements and put them into what already existed, and what was about a 12-minute arrangement turned into almost a half an hour because of what I kept putting in there. But I always was smart enough to choose to do it when I had the student musicians who could play, and I had it needs a drummer, it needs a guitarist, it needs a bass guitarist, kids who can play acoustic guitars, some kids, there's a part for a recorder, and so on. And I always made sure I had those, they're all out there, and we had the best time. We had the best time. We went to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and one of these exchange concerts, and I took that arrangement, that expanded arrangement of Godspell with me, and of course the guys or girls of my two acoustic guitar players were two talented young ladies, and actually my recorder player was too, and we did that. And although I wish we'd done that as well in Naugatuck, we did the best job ever. It was one of those, one of those perfect musical moments that happens every once in a while, luckily, and we nailed it there. And the kids, the Portsmouth high school kids, the New Hampshire kids, they couldn't get over it. They couldn't get over it, and they said, "How do you do that? How do you get your director to do that? I don't and they'd go on like that. But it was just, if the music is really quality stuff, or is a quality arrangement, the music will speak to the student, the singer, the performer. It just does. If it's really good stuff, it'll do what it's supposed to, which it'll grab you emotionally, spiritually, musically, whatever. Just it does.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think having a very good director and conductor helps with that too.
Well, we try. I always made sure I did my homework and prepping stuff, not only with them, but prepping myself, looking at, if I had this, how could I make it better? How could I tweak it a little better? Is there something the basses are singing in this that maybe I could change it a little bit that would help them do it better for them? And I always did that. And that was the music theory coming out of me, that I love to do arranging. And so I could sit at the piano and I would start to, how about if I did this instead of, oh, I like that. And I would make some note and so on. And it worked. It worked. And it's fun to do that. It's fun to do, especially when it does work.
Yeah.
The students were very supportive of the tasks put in front of them, and their parents were especially, they helped make things happen. I had a wonderful parents group, including raising money. That's that elephant in the room that nobody likes to talk about. That happens. I always worked at. Is there time to tell 2 stories?
Sure. Yeah. Tell me 2 stories. I would love it.
Okay. I always worked real hard for the kids. You got to be careful that they don't get a big head because they're singing in this wonderful place, or, and they get standing ovation from 600 people. Because I always used to tell them, it really matters every time you perform, and you always do your best job, regardless of who's out there going to listen. When we, one of the European trips you mentioned, we were in Germany. We were heading home, and we were in Berlin, and we had sung in a couple concerts hall and had an audience of 800 people that loved what we did. And we were heading toward the airport, and we were ahead of schedule, which rarely happens. And our guide, who traveled with us, says, "Do you have a few minutes?" Says, "There's a place that I'd like you to stop." And we stopped at a Russian Orthodox church. Now, this is after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. This was in the 90s. We were there. And I said, "I'd like to bring you in here." And we had about 40 kids. And we go into this, and not a big church, but it was round. Mm. And we walked in, and we met a couple of the priests and a couple nuns. And they showed us around the church and a lot of the Russian icons that they have in in Russian Orthodox sanctuaries. And you could tell that not a whole lot of people come to the Russian Orthodox Church after the fall, after Glasnost. And I said, and I came to, I said, can we sing a song for you? And so I had the kids line up, and they started literally around the edge, the perimeter of this church, which was in the round.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this piece by Mendelssohn called Heilig, which is holy. And it's Heilig, 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 or Holy, Holy, Holy. And it's in 8 parts. And it starts with the first soprano, second soprano, first alto, second tenor, same thing, first bass, second. And it starts with Heilig, 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 Heilig. And it builds a chord starting with the first sopranos. And it starts with the first has the first, seconds get the next note, altos get the next, and so on. And it builds all the way around to the low bass at the end. And it builds and builds and builds. Sorry. And it built into this magnificent chord. And they sang a beautiful job, kids. And we finished. And I turned around and said, there you go. And the priest and the nuns were crying. And that's what makes it important. That's what I try to teach the students. That's what it's about. Like if you had the one crying, I won't cry on this one. We also, locally at Christmas time, would go out and sing everywhere. And we usually end up doing about 9 concerts. Some very short and small, and others big ones. And there's this nursing home in town in Naugatuck called Glendale. And we go there every year. And we go down, and we only do 20 minutes, 25 minutes program for them. And they had this kind of general room, and they would bring in the residents in wheelchairs, walkers. And then they brought in 2 people on a gurneys, basically wheeled them in on their beds. And we introduced ourselves, and we sang for them. And I told the kids, it says, when we're done, we're not going to run out the door. I want you to go out there and talk with them. So I said, wish them a Merry Christmas, hold their hand, do something like that. And we sang some upbeat numbers toward the end. And then we sang a couple carols, etc. And I would ask them to sing with us, although a couple of them actually sang rather well. But they were all trying. And then all of a sudden it caught me that this elderly lady lying on a gurney right 6 feet from me. And you couldn't tell. I had literally, when I noticed her before, wonder if she's even listening. And we were singing and these carols, and her hand was up on the rail, and the finger was going in tempo to the music. And so she was there. And I pointed that out to my kids after. I said, that's why. That's why we do it. So there you go. That's why I do what I do.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. Those are beautiful stories. Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly before we end, even after you retired, you did not stop with music. Like you still do these concert series in your town now, and you are now conducting a men's choir. How is that different from teaching?
Well, arranging the concert series, I'm kind of like the impresario. I just coordinate the stuff and let them come and do their wonderful job. We had our sixth and last one for the season last night. In terms of the men's group that I direct right now, which is a completely different from the students I had, they are ages 35 to 80, and yet they're all very good singers. And the guy who's 80 years old, he says, "I'll never stop." And I've had him as old as about 86 sing, and they actually still sing very well. Hats off to them. So in terms of the older group, it's called the Barnstormers, the men's group. I sometimes can't push them as hard as I do the students. I always have to check myself with things I want to get done in a rehearsal, and I'm, okay, let's do this. No, let's do it again. Okay, now I want to do this here, and an hour and a half later, I'm getting the high sign from one of the singers. It says, time to back it off, Bill. And where the kids, my students, they wanted to get it right too. And so they were very willing to go the extra mile. Mm-hmm. But other than that, cutoffs are cutoffs, and singing in tune is singing in tune, and diction is diction. And it doesn't matter whether you're 80 or 18. That needs to be good. So that doesn't change.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I love it that you've come and talked with me about your career. Just to finish up, what sort of advice do you have for anybody wanting to be a musician or a music educator like yourself? What sort of advice would you give someone like that?
Get as much training as you can. And when your professor is laying it on you, don't worry about it. There's a reason. And really get as much training, as much experience as you possibly can, and not only as a performer, but organizationally. Some people seem to forget how important that is. Being true to yourself in terms of this is what you really want to do. Don't go into music as a profession if you don't want to work really hard. If you want an easier job, then you better do something else. Because, I on occasion, I'll give you an analogy. I coached tennis at Naugatuck High School for a lot of years. And during the first years I did it, got paid $300 for an entire season. I made the mistake of sitting down one day and figuring out, took out all the hours I did with practice and games, matches, and so on. Came out to $1.22 an hour. And I got to tell you that the same thing would happen if you're in the music business. If you're tired and you really don't want to spend another hour organizing that, but it really needs to be done by tomorrow, you can't say, I'm too tired. You've got to say, okay, I got to get that done. And then that's what you do. But I have never been disappointed in the extra time, effort, training that I have spent in preparing what I'm going to do musically, whether it's as a teacher or as a conductor or making arrangements of things. I've just never, it's because that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so here we go. And off we go.
And off we go.
Yeah.